This lecture will provide an introduction to wisdom literature of the Hebrew Bible. Wisdom involves a quest for skillful living. In preparation for viewing this lecture, you should have formed responses to these two questions. I like to think of wisdom as involving navigation. When we think of navigation, it means that someone is taking a journey. And when wisdom is needed, it means that we're journeying towards a particular destination, a destination which we can't already grasp. It's beyond our grasp. It's also a destination that, from where we now stand, we cannot fully see that ultimate end. In view of this fact, then it means we need intermediate waypoints, some reliable references. If it's literal navigation, then we need satellites with GPS, or in older fashion, compasses, or that orient to magnetic north, that is a reliable point of reference outside of where we are. Or in earlier days, stars themselves, points of reference outside of my immediate frame of reference. That is what wisdom involves. We're interested in this journey because there's a destination which is so valuable to us that we would like to overcome any intermediate obstacle which may threaten to derail us or prevent us from getting there. Wisdom is the information that helps us get from here to there. Richard Clifford, in his overview of biblical wisdom literature, makes this statement. Take a moment to read it over. Two things I appreciate from Professor Clifford's statement here. One is the timelessness of wisdom. The wisdom enterprise has commanded value for people across the ages. And secondly, there is need for wisdom because things are not always as they appear. That's something that a graduate school advisor of mine routinely said about Semitic studies. We look at things, they are not always as they appear. And that's true for a broader scope of life as well. Here are some examples that illustrate the fact that humankind has valued wisdom from earliest time. Consider this first. It dates to 2600 BC. It comes to us from Egypt, a document known by the name of its purported author, Kagemini. He was the vizier or prime minister under King Senefru of Egypt, the 4th dynasty. In this particular document, he commends restraint in eating and commends modesty. This fragment gives an idea that relates to that. The submissive man prospers. The submissive man is praised. Next, consider this item from the instruction of Amenemhet, 12th dynasty of Egypt, 2000 BC. In terms of orientation to biblical history, it's useful to use an anchor point for Abraham at 1800 BC. So here, the instruction of Amenemhet, 200 years earlier than the approximate date for Abraham. And he recorded this piece of instruction: don't trust anyone. Purportedly, this came from his father, another king of Egypt, by the name of Sesostris. And as far as we know, his father was assassinated. Now read that into the background of the statement, don't trust anyone, and it has a great deal more gravity. Those first two arose from the Nile culture, Egypt, and Egypt preserved for us a wealth of wisdom information. Actually, the greatest store of wisdom information from the ancient world was recorded and preserved out of Egypt. The Mesopotamian Valley also knows of wisdom literature. There's some significant ancient documents there. Here is one in Akkadian called the Councils of Wisdom. The dates again are BC, 1500 to 1200, roughly. Again, if you're looking for anchor points in biblical history, the Exodus happens along this time, with the monarchy beginning in about 1100 BC with King Saul. So this is prior to King Saul. Beware of careless talk. Guard your lips, for what you say in a moment will follow you afterwards. That same saying and collection continues by reading, if the king entrusts to you his seal and lets you enter his treasure house, do not covet his wealth or plan a secret crime. You will be discovered. So some solemn warning against an individual, or more particularly probably a bureaucrat, someone who is part of the royal court, advising them not to abuse their privileges with the king. Turning to more contemporary sources, we can see illustrated that wisdom is timeless and knows no international bounds. From South America, an earlier student brought this to class one day. A new broom sweeps best. The explanation that she gave was in the context of a new company employee. That is the employee who will work the hardest to impress her or his supervisor. That hiring that individual was a wise choice. The new employee is most diligent, would be one way to paraphrase this. How about this clever one from Southeast Asia, particularly Thailand? Again, this came to us from a seminary student. Don't ride an elephant to catch a grasshopper. And this from Asia, from Japan, even monkeys fall from trees. Wasn't Abraham Lincoln the originator, or at least he's the one that's credited with this last one? Your liberty ends where my nose begins. From this brief sample, it's easy to see that cultures the world over are interested in wisdom and have taken time to distill wisdom into clever, pithy apothegms or sayings. Here's another question that you would have prepared in advance of viewing this video. I am increasingly persuaded that our current culture has an increasing appetite for wisdom. Admittedly, it's not universal, but it is very substantial, and it offers us who have been persuaded that life is in Jesus Christ an avenue of conversation, an avenue of engagement. To me, this is one of the most pertinent and intriguing layers of our study of wisdom literature. So please reflect on your experience in modern culture as we look over these various indications, I believe, of a modern appetite for wisdom. I'm not saying a modern appetite for the Bible, but of wisdom. And then we have the opportunity of pointing people to the best wisdom available. Personal choices are in vogue this day. Our Western culture is experiencing, by and large, a good level of prosperity and also of pluralism. People are living longer in the whole and living more comfortably. We enjoy choices of food, choices of vacations, and accessories. The doctrine of tolerance emphasizes that people have the right to make choices of ethnic interests and expression, occupational choices, choices of entertainment and lifestyle. biblical wisdom is founded on the premise that indeed human beings have the power to choose, particularly to choose courses of action or expressions of behavior. We are not determined individuals, but we have the power to choose. Biblical advice is offered in order to help someone, typically in Proverbs, a pupil, make a wise choice, a conscious, wise choice. In addition to individualism and the power of choice being in vogue, there is also in vogue the power to change. Within our culture is the assumption that we can take charge of ourselves, that we can change ourselves, change our self-perception, change our health, change our career. Biblical wisdom presents advice with a clear implication that indeed change is possible. Most especially the naive youth, the impressionable young person, can be trained so as to become a strong individual, a contributor to society, characterized by integrity, by reverence for God, and by self-restraint. These come through the power to change. Third, within our modern culture, pragmatism is in vogue. Wade Clark Roof, in his volume Spiritual Marketplace, which I commend to you, observes that, and this is an approximate quote, pragmatism as ideology and practice has a strong hold on the boomers, as it has for Americans historically. I don't believe that that stopped with the boomers. As we examine more recent generations, the pressing question, does it work, remains very important. This question may be asked ahead of asking the question, is it ethical? For if it does not work, and if a particular course of action does not work, then it is discarded, or people look for ways in order to make it work. When we turn to Scripture and ask the question, what part of the Bible speaks the language of pragmatism, we land squarely in wisdom literature. Wisdom literature has value because it plots a path that works. It's pragmatic. Sometimes that pragmatism is described apart from ethical approval. In other words, the sage, the wise person, and we'll use that term sage often in this course, refers to the person who is an exponent of wisdom, like a teacher. The sage may say, here's a course of action which has some fruitful outcome. That is to say, you might get ahead, but then later on he may turn it upside down and say, that avenue seemed successful in the short haul, but in terms of long-term ethics, it's totally hazardous. Here's an example of that. From Proverbs 17:8, a bribe is like a magic stone in the eyes of those who give it. Wherever they turn, they prosper. So here is a statement that bribery is pragmatic, but pragmatic in the short haul. As we study the sage's teaching about bribery overall, he says he wants nothing to do with it and does not commend it at all. Next, we find in our current culture that skepticism is in vogue. Francois Ricard, a Canadian philosopher, is quoted as saying, modernity would not be defined in terms of this or that attribute, but rather as an ingrained mistrust of anything stable or inherited, and the constant quest for the new. This is a summary of what it means to be skeptical, an ingrained mistrust of anything stable or inherited, a constant quest for the new. Roof goes on to say, hopes pinned to old salvations have dimmed. There is uncertainty here skepticism. There is uncertainty on the part of many as to exactly what to believe or where to find answers to pressing questions, which incidentally explains why pragmatism is often appealed to. If we are accustomed to thinking of the biblical record as primarily a message of certitude, of confidence, then a course in the study of wisdom literature is of great value to us, particularly the book of Ecclesiastes, and alongside it, the book of Job. The wisdom portions such as these are where we encounter rich and wrestling skepticism. Here the masks of hypocritical spirituality fall to the ground as women and men give voice to their incredulity. If God is on the throne, why does he not bring injustice to judgment? Within our culture, we find that wisdom is in vogue. It's been observed recently that based on book sales, 4 categories of religious books top the sales chart. Most popular are the books on near-death experiences or encounters with angels or invasion of aliens. Second are books on ancient wisdom. Books that generally assume that something terribly important to human life has been lost but must and hopefully can be regained. These might stem from the fields of Buddhism, Native American spirituality, feminine spirituality, or New Age, and they promise a greater fullness to life. After near-death and ancient wisdom, the third most popular religious category of books are self-help books, aimed at improving well-being, using spiritual disciplines in order to gain power over besetting ills. And fourth, religious or spiritual fiction. So we see that wisdom, particularly those second and third of the top 4 categories, are in vogue in our culture. Based on these 5 elements, I believe we can confidently say that the Bible offers a bridge, a vital bridge, to modern spiritual hunger. In the middle of an atmosphere when people are distancing themselves, alienating themselves from religion in their quest for a new spiritual identity, we can point out that their hunger for wisdom is best met in sources found within Scripture and the theology that underpins those sources. This introductory lecture will be concluded in the next video.